Right, this is going to be the fourth episode of Best Damn League Show, period, because that's right. We're going with the American way of speaking on this one. We say period at the end. Again, like I said, you have to realize that period isn't anything in England. It's not the name of the fucking class. We call it class. I mean, I guess obviously you could make some sort of joke like women would know what it's about, but then what would I know about that, right? That's built my whole brand, but not
Oh
not
my
being
God.
related to women in any way, apparently. So,
Well, I would say that, based on some of the takes that I've had, it seems like, I've had a bunch of French people that
okay,
could be dealing with that right now in my
okay,
mentions. I'm not sure what's going on there,
fair
but yeah,
play.
yeah,
So,
go
okay,
for
here's
it.
where we're going to start, Dom, which is I've noticed for so far, I actually feel like there's one thing I'm missing from this LEC split, dude, which is there's been good banter, like G2, as we talked about in the last episode, doing a pretty good job bantering. Perks has done some fucking firework. Like, I don't know if anyone saw that fucking blabber clap back he had the other day, which is just like, that was a chef's kiss if anyone saw it. Like, basically just put a plat. He did that thing, which is I've always considered my superpower, which is that you say the thing that is true, it's just really hurtful. Like there's clearly like there's an element. He did it like just joking among lads, but it's like there was a 1% of truth in that. That sort of you can tell. Blabber was like, Jesus, shit, that was a nerve. Fuck, what? I thought we were just messing around, dude. So anyway, there is some good banter, but here's the one thing though. I feel like I don't feel like at the moment there's any real like, do you actually feel like there's any real drama surrounding LEC this time? It just feels like the teams are playing the games. I don't feel like there's any big, like, revenge fantasy anyone's got or any big. I can't tell what the main storyline is yet. I mean, maybe this is just a symptom of Rogue leading the league and never losing any games. I don't know. The
Yeah.
most boring motherfuckers of all time, by the way. So, I don't know. What do you think it is?
Well, I think that a lot of the good storylines are just not that interesting based on team performance. So, like, for example, BDS versus Fnatic was supposed to be Adam versus Upset. Like,
True.
was Upset right all along, or did Upset's wife ruin the entire league? Like that's
It's
what I wanted.
irrelevant now, though, isn't it? No one even cares.
I mean, the way Adam's performing, it's just kind of fucking sad. It's like you don't even want to put out the memes. I saw him die twice at level 1 to BB, and instantly in my head, the first thing I was thinking was to tweet out, "Is this Upset's wife's fault too?" Like I was just gonna. But it's like, you know what, man, I don't even have the heart to do it. It's looking so fucking bad for BDS that I don't even know if I want to go there. So I feel like there's not super interesting storylines just because the teams that would have like the drama, I mean, number one, the players are all kind of like likable. So for example, like you'd have like G2 versus Perks. But G2, like, Perks doesn't have any real drama with the people on G2. It's like him versus the owner. So you don't really have that war of like two players who are, like on opposite teams that used to be together that now dislike each other, and you have that real bloodbath. You don't have that right now in LEC. It's kind of like, oh, Perks kind of like dislikes this org, and Adam kind of doesn't like this guy's wife. You don't really have the combat that you'd want inside the game.
Oh, great. Like, it's just at the moment I've been watching that because since all the rosters have changed, I feel like there isn't any natural rivalry. Like, as you say, it's not even really Perks against, like, Caps, is it? Like, it's just Perks against Carlos, essentially. And even in that scenario, that storyline's a bit outdated at this point in time. No one really gives a fuck now that he's in Vitality. Right, let's talk about a topic you brought up there, which is obviously Adam on BDS. Look, BDS in general hasn't been good. I mean, if you remember on the last episode, basically the one person we sort of peeped praise on was Synkrov because, I mean, look at the rest of the team. The rest of the team seem pretty underwhelming, but he's actually been fairly good, especially for a new player. But I actually just want to wind the clock back on this. So essentially, we need to incorporate what your take was on Adam from his first ever split summer last year when he came obviously into Fnatic. People remember they did that bizarre scenario where, because Selfmade was gone, you had like the role swap of Bwipo into jungle, and then they brought in obviously Adam from the ERLs, and then obviously everything went really well. Everyone was hyping him. Everyone was like, "Oh, you could have won LEC," and everyone was saying, is he the best top player? Like the conversations got really heady. Like people were going to the limit. And I've seen this story a million times, so I want to get into this one, which is player who plays one split gets a lot of acclaim, and now, dude, it's not even like it's us. Like if it was only us doing like that thing of like the reverse Perks, like I told you guys he wasn't that good and now he's not. If it was only us, I'd get it, right? The joke is it's the same fans who were telling us this guy was fucking the next god of the top. Like they made it out like he was the next wonder, and now they want him out themselves. Like half the people don't seem to actually care about this guy in the LEC anymore.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to defend some of his plays, but it's the same overreaction shit that we always get. And I think that maybe I went too light on Adam in our previous episode of the Crackdown with Peter Dunn, where I said he was the 6th best top laner. It just felt like the conversations about him being like the best were so far gone in that direction that if I actually came in with like, no, he might be the 8th place, it would make me automatically so much of a hater.
It would just seem like you were just too far from reality.
That no one would even listen to anything that
Yes.
I said, right? So I feel like we're seeing the same problems, but now suddenly the narrative is that he's like actually the worst. I was watching an esports Maniaco stream and I had it like muted because, you know, like I was streaming at the same time. I just saw that somebody told me like, hey, look, they're doing a tier list right now of top lane. They actually had him 10th, I believe. They had him as the worst top laner in all of LEC. So I feel like it's so hard to have discussions around players because they're always going to be tied so hard to like their own teams in most situations, unless you're doing a synchro and you're performing well every single game while your team is shitting the bed. Your skill level is going to be tied so hard to your actual team that it's almost impossible to discuss any of the intricacies. Like people will just assume that because we didn't actually have to see Adam side laning versus anyone in the mid to late game, they'll just assume that he's able to do it, that he's just as good as it. Or like, even if he makes a couple minor mistakes, it's like, oh, but he's just like a first split player. In his second split, he'll be able to incorporate all of that instantly. Where it's like not that easy, man. Like you might try to start learning some of the other skill sets, but then you might lose a little bit of what made you so good in the first place. So for Adam, his laning, right? Like his laning was always something that he was able to get leads on the champions that he actually performed really well on and things that he understood. Now you see him like play lane. It's like, okay, you got the Aurelia versus Jace counter pick. Oh wait, BB killed you twice at level 1, and you can't even lane anymore. So you're sitting at the tier 2. You can't even farm the minions that are coming in off the first 3 waves. And it's like so bad that you don't even actually get to see if he's made those, those advancements in that those things that he was struggling with. So I feel like the issue right now with Adam is that he's now not winning lane anymore. So you can't even say that's a strength. And then all the flaws that you could see last split in the mid game are just still there. So there's almost like nothing that people are able to grasp onto that they're able to be like, actually, he is still really good.
Yeah, I mean, I would just start a very light thing I would immediately touch on is if anyone's watched my shows for the last few years, it was actually when I did Listen Local that we established what I consider basically, it's almost like a type of fallacy. I would call it like I would say it's the trajectory fallacy for rookies, because it was infamously Loco who just always bought into this narrative. In the same way as Local was the guy where if the legendary player drops off for a split, like they're just done, get him out the league, he would do the opposite with rookies. Like if a rookie had one good split, in his mind, it's like he banked how good they were and they were going to be at that level next split, or they would get a bit better. Like, you know, they would go say 10% extra. And the joke is, even though obviously he would never explicitly say this, it sounds ridiculous. If you used his logic, then you only had to wait about 5 splits and they were like the best player in the entire league, you know, because they were the only person apparently in the league who would just keep getting like progressively better every time. And everyone else in the world, like you imagine, goes up or down or has like a through line. So basically, people already did that with Adam, where what they did was they took everything they liked in the first split and they were like, well, that's all permanent. Like he's figured that out. Like he's nailed that. Like essentially the joke is they made it sound like he reinvented League of Legends in top lane. Like spoiler, he hadn't. Like what it turned out was, yeah, he had a couple of champions he was really good on. And quite frankly, I think the fact that he was a pure rookie and these weren't champions that were like the ones that were must bans meant people just kept leaving him up over and over and over again. Whereas if you actually went back in time now, those coaches just target ban the fuck out of him in half those games. And it's not that he can't win any games, but he would just win less games by default of not getting all these champions. He was essentially like a fucking 2-trick on a one. Like if everyone really did know that, they would have just made him play all the meta champions. It's obvious, right? Then also you got to add in, he didn't just play for nobody. He played for a team that had people like Hillsang and Upset on it. So as a result, like guess what? You're not putting all your fucking attention into stopping Adam anyway. Like in theory, he's one of the least consequential people on that team when you look on paper, isn't it? So there's all these factors that if people don't get it, what I always try to study in the game, because I'm not as much of an expert about the minutiae of League, is I try to look at like team dynamics and what relationships seem to work. So then you add in, he had a literal, one of the best top laners Europe's ever had as his fucking jungler in a role swap position. Like if you can't imagine, that guy knew like when to help you out, when to go like interesting timing stuff. Of course he fucking did. It looked like he essentially basically just fucking babysat him half the time. And then the last thing I would say is this, and this is the angle that I actually do find a bit whack, which is, this is going to sound like pure haterism, but this is what I thought maybe we could have an interesting discussion about. In a weird way, right? In the beginning, it is actually good if you're too cocky. As in, you actually are a bit delusional. Not totally. If you're totally delusional, you'll fuck the game up. Obviously, you just didn't. But if you think you're actually slightly better than you are, and the best way you can accomplish that, by the way, as a young man is, you just have no experience. So you obviously haven't been through the scenarios that would make you think, like, shit, maybe I should be a bit more conservative. In the short term, that works out as far as I can tell in most games. It's the same concept in like poker. If if you're just really aggressive, it takes people a while to figure out that you're just being like needlessly aggressive sometimes. Some they just assume initially, wow, he must just have a hand, or wow, he must really know how to play like aggressively, right? That works in the short term, but it doesn't work forever. It's the reason why people don't come in the league and just stay like a super aggro play, except if you're LEC apparently, for like fucking 10 years, is it? Like eventually that either doesn't work or you have to learn the rest of the game. So I also thought like when I look back now, this will sound like haterism, but look, that split just looks like a perfect storm of every one of these factors like overlapping. And in the middle, as you said, mate, it's not even like after that he was the MVP of the league or anything. Like he was just like slightly overrated player on the team that ended up being the second best team, but was probably like the fourth or fifth best team going into playoffs. So like I think people have romanticized the fuck out of that split, mate. Like you might not be wrong. You maybe should have been harsher, because I know what you mean though. If you had him said like the statement like he's the 8th best top laner while they were like third in the league, it would have been considered in the vein of like, you know, the LS, like the bad Rogue would beat TSM in a best of 5, or like Jin Air would beat G2 in 2019. You know, those famous takes that people just the problem is I agree with you, they sound so nuts on the surface, most people will never penetrate to what point you were making.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that even as somebody who's making that point, if you think that in your head and then you start going through it, it's like you don't even allow yourself to fully explore the possibility of him being the 8th best top laner in the league last split, because it sounds so much of like pure haterism to yourself that you're like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't even want to have that take, even if that's what I actually think. So you don't even let yourself explore to that point of like, is he the 8th best top laner in the league? And the other thing is, like, if you look at the other top laners, there's going to be the ones that are like all the way at the fucking bottom of the league that no one is going to like be supporting at all, right? So those people, like, you obviously have to just like, you don't have any leg to stand on saying that those players are potentially better than Adam. And then the other thing is that like at the points where we were having this conversation, he had just beat Wonder in lane, which was like, yeah, I mean, he was one of the people that everyone would say would be like a top 5 top laner at minimum in the league. So it's really hard to go to that angle. But I mean, I think that people really underestimate how good everyone else on that team is. Like, who was the worst player that he played with on Fnatic? Who was the worst player that Adam played?
Probably in theory, Nisqy, right?
Nisqy was like what, the second best?
He's still pretty good player
laner in the league.
For sure, yeah.
Nisqy
he had to make a team, yeah.
So it's like when you're on that team, it's really, really fucking hard. Like your lane really doesn't matter. Even if he goes for those 1v1s and he was like mad inting some of those games, I doubt it would have changed that much with how Fnatic was actually performing in that split. Like he just doesn't actually have to do that much. Number one, top lane is one of the like worst roles in competitive, period. Like that's just a fact. And then on the other side of it, like the rest of his team is a bot focused team where he just really needs to like exist and, you know, try to help out other people when he can. So I think now is when there's a huge test for Adam in his career. How is he going to play now that he does have more pressure on him? Because before there was zero expectations and his team is performing really well. Now everyone's really down on him. Like people say that he's the fucking 10th best top laner in this league right now. If he fucks up a game, like if he plays needlessly aggressive and fucks up a game, they just lose. It's not like, oh, well, we can still win. Oh, it's a bad game, but we can still win. Like he had a couple of those on Fnatic that people just don't remember when he was playing Mordekaiser into BB's Jace. BB's just shitting all over him in the lane. He's like 0-3, but it doesn't matter at all because BB's on Schalke and they have Correa on the team and they're 3-15. People just automatically wipe that out of their mind. And now when you're looking at his games, like, yeah, now when he gets dicked by BB, it's like you have ruined the entire game for your team. Like you just actually lose because he doesn't have the members on his team to actually carry him in the mid to late game. He's actually going to have to make good decisions. And in the mad game, it was pretty much all bad decisions that led to this level of actually, like, you know, having the game just lost from such a winning position. I just got to say, man, it must be the absolute most frustrating thing in the world to be grabs in these games, because it's like, man, like you can't teach everyone the entire fucking game. Like that is not what coaching is. How many times are they going to be up 10K, 11K in a scrim in the mid to late game, and you're actually going to have these types of issues surface themselves and then be able to correct them? It's like he's working on trying to like fix their early game and how their lanes play, and then you get on stage, you have all that go right, and then suddenly like the whole team just runs it down in team fights versus Mad Lions, and you end up losing that game. Like this must be such a difficult experience to go from coaching G2, where seemingly everyone knows what they're doing, to then coaching this team where it's like, damn, like, do you guys actually know how to win games at all in League? And it's really concerning because when you look at like the team, it's not like these players are doing really well in solo queue or anything like that. It looks like all the players are actually worse than expected outside of Synkrov. I think Synkrov deserves a way better team. I think he's been really fucking good so far, but he's a jungler. And if you're a jungler and on a team that doesn't have great laners, you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah, the other sad thing for me is obviously the other name that you do know on that team that's proven was Limit, but like, what's he supposed to do with this team? Like, he's in like probably the most inconsequential fucking bot lane in the league. It's just pointless, isn't it? Like, so to me, he's just going to waste away there. Like, that team in general, I'm with you. The problem they have is they essentially built as if Adam was who fans told them he was last split, but he isn't. He turns out he is just a young player trying to find his fucking, even what his like status within a team is. Like, is he supposed to be the main carry? Because at the moment, main carry ain't working for him, as you say at the moment. The difference was in Fnatic, he could fuck around, win some games that basically it wouldn't have mattered if he'd have done nothing, he would have won them anyway. But in this team, if he fucks up, he just loses the game. I'm with you on that one. Like, that's why to me this team is whack. Because first of all, like you said, Grab's essentially just playing, he's fucking kindergarten teacher for everyone. They're all fucking new players almost. Then you look at the other player aside from Adam, Nuclear Int, he has not lived up to the fucking billing that they told us about this guy at all. Like, everyone who said he would be like a great replacement for fucking Abaddon, he hasn't been. Like, I get that some of you were just hyping him because he came out the French scene, and I know that some players take longer out of VR. He just hasn't been it yet. Like, he hasn't, and for me, it hasn't really, I haven't seen the hints of it either, mate. Like, the difference is, Vethio, I could go back even in that first split, I could find some games where he was looking like, ooh, there's something here. You know, maybe a limited champion pool, or maybe, you know, he has to get his, I haven't seen it almost any from this guy. Like, he just looks okay. Like, I don't really know what the point is. So to me, BDS is a bit of like a pointless story. But what I was going to bring up is basically, this is why, as a side point, I personally, if you ever look at how I rank players, because I know people are going to do the whole like middle of the fucking split and what's everyone's top three in tier lists, like you're saying. It's why I always have a bias towards a player who might be on a worse team, but is the carry. So I'll give you a classic example from LCS a few years back. When my boy Flame used to play for Immortals, FlyQuest, in the same era that you had people like Impact, Someday, right? The difference was, if Impact and Someday, their job was like be the best like Odoamne style top laner for one of the best teams in the league. In my opinion, if Flame plays well as he should be considered the better top laner, because the difference is he has to do that for his team to win. The other guy essentially completes the rest of a team. Like, those other factors have to exist before what they're the cherry on the top, as it were. So I've always had a bias in that sense anyway. It's why I thought the Adam one was overhyped, because like, this is the difference. It's a bit like in the NBA, dude. I'll have a very quick analogy to that, right? The way you can tell the guys who really are the shit coming out of the draft is when they have to go to a bad team and they're just the dude from like day one. Like that, you can tell 3 years in if that guy like really is good. If they join like a top 5 team though, and they just sort of like fit in the mix somewhere and they're like the 3rd or 4th best player, you never really know how good they are. Like, mate, I guarantee you after that Cavs win when they beat the Warriors, dude, remember how much people were hyping Kyrie Irving then? People were making him sound like he was like a top 5 player in the NBA. The joke now is, even though he is he's an amazing like eye test player, mate, he wouldn't pass the mustard. Most people wouldn't even have him top 10 in the NBA right now, you know, because the problem is when he had to be the best player, just didn't do it. So I think I can't really see that turning around for the Adams story for me, because the flaws he has as a player, just look like they're ingrained in his playing style at the moment, mate. So he's gonna hit some of these games. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, no, that's why you got to be a fan of the guys like John Morant that go to the Grizzlies and then they're just fucking insane.
Oh, what a stud.
Like,
yeah,
I love that guy. All right, yeah, continue. I just wanted to throw that in. That's immediately who I thought of when you were saying that, like the guy who goes to, I mean, it's not like the Grizzlies are like the worst franchise ever, but that's not a franchise that's supposed to be super legit. So the fact that he was able to perform there, I mean, I think that's enough said on players that actually have what it takes to be real stars in the league.
Okay, let's do this then. From the pits of BDS, we'll go to the heights of the LEC, which is the usual episode of chapter fucking 5 or whatever, and why Fnatic still isn't quite as good as they should be. Mate, this XL game has to be where we start here, Dom. Because this game, like, one, I guess Mickey X already just now, like, that just was a waste of time, that whole discussion, Dom, because he had that one fucking engage at the Dragon fight. It's all worth it now, isn't it? No, it's all cool. It's, you know, who's at the end who? Like, now it doesn't even matter, because that's just the way fans are in the game. And then the second thing is, though, that fight in itself, though, did show me one of the problems I have with Fnatic, which is like, mate, it's like, how... Think about the Fnatic last split, the one we're talking about with Adam. The best quality that team had was they just had a go button where like everyone just went in at once and everyone followed up. Nobody like pussied around or like, was I supposed to go in there? Like, dude, this Fnatic is so like disconnected in that sense. It's so badly coordinated for me.
I think the thing that was so shocking in that team fight is like, so Leona Hex flashes over the wall. And I feel like when Humanoid was playing last split, he was in absolute god mode. Like, this guy would just pop off. I mean, he looked like the best player. I would have said he was the best player in the entire league last year in summer. Like he was really, really smurfing every single game. And now, I mean, he's just like he's just getting caught. Doesn't like he's getting caught by the Hex Flash over the wall. Doesn't really see what's going on. I don't know if it's because of like the prep where people aren't really giving him like a good idea of how they want to fight it. And he's not actually looking to protect himself as much as he's trying to figure out what other people are going to do. But if you watch like that dragon fight, it's like, damn, bro, you're just actually getting hit by that. You're getting hit by that. You're not flashing. And then your team instantly loses. And the thing that was so crazy to me was like the team's reaction to Humanoid dying first. Like the reaction should be instantly like cut all your fucking losses and run. Like this fight is mega lost. Like our Orianna died, got one shot, didn't even ult. The only damage we have is like a fucking Jhin at this point. We are not winning this fight, and everyone like still committed. You saw like
trying to collapse, weren't they? Yeah.
It was really weird. So I feel like this Fnatic team is just still not showing me like if I really should be hyped on them, if they actually have what it takes to be a better team. Because I mean, I know we say it every week that we're all trying to get off the rogue hype train at the first available situation, you know, like
yes.
If next week Rogue loses like a game to Misfits or something, it's like, yep, and this is what we thought would happen. Like pack it all up, 10-1, like fuck it, they're gonna get third or fourth place again. We're all trying to get off this, but the more that these games go on, I don't know who's actually going to beat Rogue. It feels like maybe Vitality, if not, and Vitality almost lost to Astralis. Like I don't know what to think about fucking that. Who else is actually going to be able to beat Rogue right now if Fnatic is going to perform like this? G2, I just feel like they don't have like the skill now. Like they're going to need more time for their rookies to actually, well, I guess I say rookies, but Targamas technically played a split in 2018. But you guys know what I mean. They're new players to actually fully acclimate to like being on a top team in LEC. And then it's like, I mean, maybe there's a world where Mad Lion gets their shit together, but Mad Lions, like, they just don't look the same. I mean, they should have lost this game to BDS that we were talking about earlier. So it's really weird. I mean, I expected Fnatic to definitely be stronger, and I think that their picks are also a little bit strange. It feels like Hilly's champions, like, he's not just playing his champions the way he normally would. Like, he used to just play, like, Rakan, Nautilus, like, Leona. Like, he would just play all of his champions. Now it's like he's throwing in the weird Rel pick that doesn't really make too much sense. I mean, he's playing a lot of Zillion. It just feels like I want to see Hilly just really take the reins back for the team and be the team's go button.
That's the thing I wonder about with this team is this is another problem you can have when you have like super teams or teams with a bunch of players who've all been like star elements in other teams. I sometimes wonder in this team if half the reason why they look like a bit disjointed is because you have a bunch of people who it was almost like they were the ones who had the green light on when you go or when they like start something. Like Razork and Misfits look like he controlled that team. Humanoid clearly was massively influential in Mad Lions, and then Hylissang basically has been the engage button of Fnatic for like 2 years. By the way, whether his teammates agreed or not, like that was actually half the problem as far as I can tell through most of the lineups, is they were filtering out the people who did or didn't want to play with that style of Hylissang play. So it makes me wonder if some of the others, it's like the problem with that scenario is it's if you have one player like that, it's easy, everyone just does what that guy does, and then you just tweak how aggressively he presses the go button. In this scenario, I almost feel like there's people who have different pacings of the game and they haven't been able to get on the same page, because you still see in the game, like the skill is still so good on the lineup. Like they're not going to lose loads of games. Like they're clearly going to be like a contender in this split no matter what. But this is the sort of like, these are the games where when you look for them playing a best of 5 series, like it's hard to feel super confident about Fnatic at the moment. Yeah,
definitely. But I mean, I guess they're like we said earlier, their advantage is that no one else looks like you'd be confident in them in the best of 5. I mean, I guess except for Rogue, right? Like I guess the top 3 teams in the league right now, if you had to say, right, like gun to your head, you got to pick a top 3 no matter what. You got to say Rogue, Fnatic, and Vitality, right? Like I don't think that you can throw Mad Lions and G2 in there based off what we've seen so far. So, I mean, I guess, you know, that's something. I mean, at least they're in the right spot. I mean, they're in a better spot than they were last split, and they ended up going to the finals. So,
it's what's well done. So if you want to talk about, like, I'll give you the microcosm version of what you described the phenomenon earlier, where, like, let's be real, we are all just waiting for some team that has some established element so we can just go, right, I don't want to be the guy who again gets tricked by Rogue. So I'm just going to pick, like, let's say Cap started playing amazingly, or Fnatic gets their shit together. Like, obviously I'm going to instantly exit, but this is the worst thing. It's not even just the Rogue story now, mate. Like, this has to be said technically, because a lot of people, like I said on podcasts, I'm going to do one soon where they want to do, like, you know, like you do your tier list of the top 3 players in each position. I'm going to have to essentially say, Dom, unironically, like technically Larssen might be the best player in the LEC. I think there's some stat I looked up where he's died like 3 times in the last 6 games.
Yeah, I think he's. I think there's
You know
definitely
what I mean?
a chance
What do
he's
you
the
want?
best player in the whole LEC.
It's legit.
I mean, here's the question: if you looked at every single player on Rogue, is there any player you would say is not top 2 right now in their role?
They all look mega. They all do, don't they?
Like it's even the players like Trimby, for example, who
Yeah.
you normally have as like the 3rd best support in the league. Now, when you compare him to like Kaiser and Hilly, like has he not just been playing better than them? Is he not just the best support right now in LEC? So I think that's the hardest thing about Rogue is, I mean, they are playing really fucking well, and I mean, I guess this exact version of the Rogue team never chokes. So maybe I'll eventually convince myself into believing in Rogue again, and then just be disappointed again, and just go extra hard, you know, on our show in finals if they fucking end up losing 0-3 or something.
The thing is, I mean, I don't have that much to say on Rogue in general. Like, they just continue to impress. Everything goes great. There's not like there's any flaws. I don't even know that I can keep clinging to that thing of like, oh, but maybe the meta switch up and too harsh. Like, at the moment, they seem like they got a really good read on it really early on. They've shown quite actually a pretty decent amount of champion diversity. It's not like they just spam the same things every fucking game. And as we alluded to, like, I think it was in the 2nd episode, the champions they are good on are all right in the fucking meta. Like, look at the drafts they can do, dude. Like, they can basically almost do like the champions they want for every player in the draft.
Even the picks that would be like, you know, champion specialties that are not actually super meta right now. If enough is taken away, Larssen could easily fall back to like an Orianna. Like if he doesn't get to play Corki Victor, which is like considered super OP right now, he can still fall back to like Orianna, even a Zir, which is those are like just perfect Larssen champions. So. Yeah, no, I think that they're looking really good. The one person that I still will have to see, you know, throughout the next 4 weeks, that's really going to determine how high I'm going to be on Rogue is going to be Malrong, because I feel like his playstyle, if he has confidence and he's been playing the way that he has, it's going to work out like every time. This guy is going to be absolutely insane. But what happens like when he has a couple of those games where things just don't work out well, where he's pathing towards something, he's skipping camps, and he ends up just being really behind as a result, the plays just don't end up being executed. Will that like change how he views the game at all? Like those are always the tough things when you're a jungler, because you'll be so conditioned to play a certain style, and then when it doesn't work, you end up so far behind that it almost makes you want to change. But how much will he actually have to change based off, you know, if his team is still succeeding elsewhere? I think that that's the one player that I think could have this thing start falling apart, is if they lose that connection that they have right now with the jungler and all the lanes.
By the way, just because we touched on it, but mainly from the Fnatic angle, with that XL win over Fnatic, we obviously built it since they were playing, I think it was Rogue and Fnatic, right? So they were playing the 2 best teams in the league. Basically, like, realistically, they were never going to 2-0, but if they'd have gone 0-2, they'd have been in a really bad spot just in the standings. Do you actually give XL any additional quarter? Do they actually look like they have anything going on?
Oh, it's so hard to say. It's so hard to say because, I mean, with the way that Mad Lions has been playing, it doesn't look like Mad Lions is a team that you can have a ton of confidence in. And I mean, Misfits did get beat pretty badly by Vitality as well. So it's really difficult to actually place it. I just have the feeling that XL is not going to have that many of these wins because they just do a lot of weird shit. I mean, when you look at their games, it's like, okay, so they have the one game that actually looks pretty impressive where they end up beating Fnatic. But then the other game this week, they just picked like Sona mid into Rogue and just lost the game in like 20 minutes. I don't even understand.
They were getting bodied in that mid lane as well.
Yeah, it didn't even look like something where I was like, oh, I can kind of see where the strategy was going to work out, but it failed here, and here. Afterwards, you're just like, okay, so Corki just took the turret alone at like, 14 minutes or some shit. Maybe they used Herald on it, whatever. But like he took 2 plates alone and then they took the turret right afterwards. And then when they got into like the point of the game where like Soda was only down like 3-4K and they get into like those team fights, Corki just one-shot everything. So it's like, how is this pick supposed to work? Like, what is the strength of the Soda mid pick? So it's kind of weird. It's like XL always does these things that make you lose faith in them, even when they have a week that I guess is, I mean, it's a success, right? It's better than what you would have expected going into the week.
Right, obviously people know over his career, one of the areas that, I mean, they made a meme out of it on LEC, but it was true. Nuclear always tried to have a more expanded champion pool. In fact, he was also famously someone where something was like, flavor of the month OP for like 2 weeks in solo queue. He would prep it and then either you had to ban it against him in the LEC or he would play it and he would just sometimes be pretty good on some of the champions. People know back in the day, things like Varus mid, etc., when you had the weird picks that you could do. Right, the question I have is this. Like, I don't even get really in this team, though, why they'd be going with some of these picks, dude. Like, Like, to me, in this team, if you look at the players they have, like, Finn just isn't reliable, mate. So in this team, it has to be Patrick and fucking Nuke Duck that carry the team. So I don't know why they're, like, to me, they almost are trying to be too versatile in the draft in this squad, mate. Like, I'm not buying it. So I wanted to ask you is this. What do you think at the moment? Because obviously there's this weird trend where people are going with like supportive mid laners in the whole bunch of the regions. Like obviously they're buying LS and Cloud9 are doing it over in LCS, right? What do you think of this trend? And then on the XL angle, we said it before, like realistically, if this split doesn't go well, like people, eventually there has to be some accountability for fucking Youngbuck. He has had loads of splits. Yeah, I still wouldn't say these are great rosters, but like at the end of the day, like if you can't make it happen, then you're not a miracle worker. Okay, then maybe you're overhyped. Does the way that XL plays in drafts make you question if there's some element of Nuke Duck's coaching that's lacking, or have we overhyped him because of the narrative angle?
I just feel like Nuke Duck will reason out a lot of these picks. And I mean, Sona Mid is the type of champion that I feel like if you do get online, then yeah, like that champion will just be super OP. It's a champion that scales really well. But I don't like the idea of giving them something as OP as Corki and then trying like the Sona Mid there. Like it just felt like, oh, so sure, I mean, your Sona might get into the mid game fine, but then they have like a Corki, which is one of like the absolute best mid-game champions in the game, and he's so fucking accelerated. The whole point of Corki is supposed to be like, oh, like you cede a lot of pressure in the early game, and then you have to play pretty much only around your package, and then once you have like your Mermana plus Ludens, you're pretty much just like a beast at that point. Then you have insane poke. This game to me just made me feel like, yeah, they just don't actually know like what they're doing. Like they're reasoning it out. Like I can understand the idea, I guess, which would be Corki has a lot of poke and Soda has a lot of sustain. And sustain generally is pretty good against poke because they poke you and then you sustain it off. But it just didn't look anywhere close. Like the amount of sustain that Nuke Duck was buying or was bringing to the team compared to the amount of poke that Larssen had was just like completely two different things. It's like you get hit by one rocket, you can't even play the game. So for me, I just feel like the ideas that they have like work on paper, but they're just so far, like they're so crazy. And I think I have the same problem with XL that I have with Mad Lions right now, where I feel like their drafts change so much from week to week that it's impossible to have any level of consistency. Like you don't know what you're working with when you're coaching this team. Like I have no idea what they're going to bring to the table, and you don't really get to master anything because you're changing so drastically. Like the way you play with a Vigar is going to be a lot different than the way you play with the Soda, which is going to be a lot different than the way you're going to play with a Victor. So I don't know. I just feel like they're changing too many things at once. Like they need to, like they can try a new pick every now and then, but they should at least have some type of like formula that they're plugging these champions into.
Normally, we derisively just ignore the bottom teams. Obviously, we did a little bit about BDS here. Spoiler, I don't think we're going to waste our time talking about SK Gaming. But the one that we should address is Astralis. And because it's not that they've done anything to change their predicament, but if anything, they've just got even worse. Because if people don't know, they've lost every single game in the split. And this is obviously a team where, if you look at the time that this organization was involved in LEC, was basically they originally came in with Origin, if people remember, in Season 9. They actually had one of the best teams who were in the first split final. Then in the summer, the team wasn't as good. Like at one point they were really good, but then they fell apart and famously didn't make the playoffs. Then the next year, if you remember, they brought in Upset instead of Patrick. At that point in time, they had Mithy exit the team though because they didn't offer him enough money. Basically, the team was still all right in spring. If you remember, they were still like a solid team, but even then they were like was somewhat limited. That was when they used to just scale like a motherfucker, if people remember. And then in the summer, famously, they finished last, even though that was like technically probably the most competitive split ever. And even the way they finished last was like, it wasn't like this where they like lose every game. It was like they were just like a couple of bad games towards the last few weeks, and that Schalke miracle run happened, if you remember. Then after that, they became just rebranded as Astralis, and during the entire time they've been Astralis, they have not only been a bottom feeder, although I give them props, occasionally they would win way more games than you'd expect, but they even looked in the Astralis era like they didn't even make any attempt to sign big names. They essentially, as far as I can tell, the origin period was a bunch of players because of Deficio getting into like people like Nuke Duck, and then Afari wants to play with Nuke Duck, and then eventually like Mithy wants to play with these good players, and then Upset wants to play with, you know, like they essentially used player relationships to like min-max, because if people don't know, back then they weren't getting paid that much, and players took a pay cut to get Upset in, and then the players were even getting asked by the org to take a pay cut because of the shenanigans with the pandemic and all that crap. So when you get to the Astralis period, as far as I can tell, without the draw of big name players, they've just, it looked to me, for real, like they've just gone to the bargain basement bin, of the 99-cent store, and then they just go, right, what's here? I guess someone used to have that. It was all right. Fuck that. It's whatever. It's cheap. And then the joke is they never get the big names, even from the RLs. I get the vibe they're one of these teams now that have become a black hole, mate, where like people don't even want to join them if they can just be in a top ERL team. So as far as I can tell, this is the ultimate example of the bottom feeder org, because they don't look like they have a game plan. They look like they're trying to spend as little as possible but keep their foot in the door, because I'm sure everyone's looking at that BDS sale and thinking, can double, triple my money that my buy-in was if I haven't spent extra money. So what do you think at the moment? Because there's two angles, obviously, people can be disappointed in. One, it's a shit team. They're losing every game, although Vitality, like you said, almost did them a favour. And there was that Fnatic game, I remember. And then the other thing is, there's the angle of, like, what's the point in them being in LEC? Like, at some point in time, they're just dragging the whole league down.
Yeah, they're dragging the whole league down, and they also have like zero marketability and zero fans. So it's not like they even have like, they've tied themselves to like extremely popular ERL players that are going to like bring some hype into their team. It's like they've just got absolutely nothing going for them. And it feels like, yeah, they are just trying to hold on for the sale. I mean, I think everyone right now is looking at K Corp, and they're looking at KOI, and they're looking at these absurd numbers in the French league and the Spanish league. And the mentality is like, okay, LEC is going to want these teams in the league at some point. I want to keep my slots so I can sell to them. But I mean, I got to say, like, the way that they go about portraying themselves, like, at least on social media, I mean, maybe there is no good job, because, I mean, the more I think about it, being the Astralis social media manager must be one of the absolute worst jobs in esports, period. I can't think of anything that's more depressing than having to try to like tweet out like semi-hopeful like tweets after you're 0-9. You don't really have, like, everyone's rooting against you. People don't like watching your team, so there's nothing that you can like even like do with your fans. It's literally just people verbally abusing you all day on Twitter.
Oh, for sure.
While you try to just be
Duncan, like, you reassure you all the time, I've no doubt.
Yeah, just you have to try to be just delusionally hopeful about your team. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, we are 0-9, but look, like, Schalke made a miracle run before. We can do it too. It's like, yeah, but Schalke didn't look like Schalke had like IWillDominate on the team and shit like that. Like, you guys are actually just fucking running it every single game. And the way they lose games is like, man, how are you not going to win that Vitality? Vitality made it as free as possible. Like, Selfmade, Alfari, Lebrov, all were having some of their worst games of the entire split. And then they just like, they just let them win the game. They're just like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. We just dive into tier 3, and then they end up losing the game. Like, they're not going to even make Vitality work for it at all. They just gave it straight over to Vitality. So, I mean, I just feel like this team is, it's tough to watch. And I feel like it's really a disservice to the league. I think it's kind of embarrassing for LEC that they essentially are just hanging on and abusing the franchise system. Like, I don't feel like this team is making any steps to improve it. Like, look, if you start 0-9, wouldn't you think that if you really, really cared, you'd make some roster changes? Like, something needs to happen if you start 0-9. Like, Zondra's been running it down the whole split. You've had Promise Q. He just had one of his best games, honestly, against Vitality. But like, he's had a pretty bad split. Like, you're not going to change anything. You're literally just okay, potentially going 0-18. That's what this team looks like.
Yeah, my big problem here is this. It's that I agree with you totally, by the way. They fucked the marketing completely, because if they even were going with the angle of like, we're developing talent, they can't even claim that, because they don't take the players that looked like they had the potential. What they do is this. It's almost like they're just doing the bare minimum to seem like they're trying, because like most of the players they sign are like fringe cases of like, you probably should have a shot in LEC, but it's like, you know, as like one of another member on a team. But the problem is they just make a whole team out of those players. And if you look, all they do is they basically give like one real player a shot. So it's usually the mid laner when it wasn't Nuke Duck. They take one player that maybe could turn out to be pretty good. The rest of the players, like I say, are just meh. They're just whatever. And as far as I can tell, they're just nobody bidding for them, so you just get them cheap as fuck. Like, that's why, to me, them having Promise Q is even more egregious. The team's bad anyway, but he's also like a reviled player. Like, dude, the idea that isn't like Vander or someone like, do you not want any fans? Like, that's just like a free, if you sign Vander instead of Promise Q, you just get some free fans. You just have a few people who don't essentially hate you just because they hate Promise Q. Like, I'm not even hating on the guy, just hasn't earned his spot, has he? And then also the other thing is, knowing what I know about them in CSGO, I've essentially been waiting for this day for a long time, Dom, because what people don't know is this. The organization behind Astralis is the most like nonsense PR exercise of all time, because if people don't know, they didn't actually build that team. What happened was literally 4 of the 5 players that became like the greatest CSGO team ever were just in their team when they became that organization. So what happened is some people who knew how to make money move around between accounts just came to one of already the best teams. It was one that used to be TSM, if you remember, and just said, like, we'll just make an organization with us. And if you remember, the original story was that it was actually a player-owned organization, and they tried to spin it that like the players owned it. In reality, as far as I know, they only ever owned like, let's say like 5% each, and even then, they all, be like idiots, sold up immediately just for a tiny bit of extra salary. So almost immediately that PR angle was bullshit. And then what they did the whole time was, while the CSGO team was amazing, winning majors and being all the time top 3, top 5, always an amazing squad, they just used all the media stories to make it sound like the reason the team won was because of things the org did. Like, for example, they just went heavy on the sports angle of like, we brought in sports psychologists, and so that worked with the players' mentality, and we made them all exercise so they're all fit and they're good examples of what a professional should be. And we coached, would have them heavily regimented so they boot camp properly and they're not slacking. And that all sounded great, Dom, except this: the day that they didn't have players that were playing at a world-class level, all that shit meant nothing. It accounted to absolutely nothing. And in fact, what they've done since then in the last year or so is they've just let all the big name players go from their org. A couple of them they just gave big contracts, probably so they can still claim publicly that they've got some of the championship roster. But as far as I can tell, the entire org isn't about spending money. It's not about trying to go for excellence. It's trying to have the perception that you're doing innovative things, but they're not a team that signs big players. Put that way, if people don't know, they've never signed any big name players in terms of like, like this was like the biggest prospect. They've never done it ever in any game. Like, they got a couple, even when they were the best team ever, they got one player who helped them become really good, but he was like himself a bit like, a bit of a fringe case. It was a bit like signing a leader or something like that, so you could go for this guy, but it's a bit of a gamble. They had one that they did like that. So my problem is, I agree with you, they don't try anything, dude. Like, and I don't think they will. I expect they will genuinely just bleed out and they'll just wait to either be removed or they'll sell, as you're saying, maybe at the end of the year, Riot comes to them, goes, look, you're obviously fucking around, but you know what? We've got someone who wants to buy the spot for 35 million. You sell to them, you leave, problem solved. We all leave happy, right? And by the way, I'm sure they would feel happy. There's no way they've spent more than probably 10 million on their roster over all these years. So my problem is, it's like you said as well, it's not like this is it has to be this lineup for the rest of the year. The lineup's been so bad. This is exactly when, by the way, if you're Astralis, you go and you get like lead, you get anyone out there who's got, you just tell them, you want a crack at it, we'll put you in the game and you get all your champions for the next 5 games or something. Like, there's big names you could pull the trigger on and give a chance to. Or if you want to really develop talent, scout someone who might be good in a year and give them the rest of the year to develop in this team. They're doing neither. It just looks like they're wasting everyone's time.
Yeah, they're wasting everyone's time. I mean, I love the PR approach that they've done where they do the same thing that you just described in CSGO, where they're like, yeah, but like our players are now like, they've got good sleep schedules and they're eating right. It's like, what the fuck? Like, do you really think that that's like actually more important than being a fucking good player? Like, what the fuck is that gonna do? Like, I could have the best eating, like the best nutrition. I could have the best fucking trainer in the world. If you put me on a basketball court right now, I will solo lose any NBA team every single game that I fucking play. Like, it doesn't, like, how does that not matter compared to actual skill of the players? Like, the problem is you have no players that are actually higher than maybe the 9th or 8th best player in the entire league. Like, you have to have some skill somewhere. And sure, if you're going to have a bunch of budget players, you at least have to find some players that aren't going to be like the highest paid players. You don't have to be having like $1 million salaries, but you have to find like somebody who you're going to pay like $250K that's going to be like pretty fucking solid. You need somebody like that, but they have nothing. They literally have nothing to build on. And I think that it's going to get worse from here. I mean, the way that I see it is, if you are already 0-9 and you take a bad loss like that one versus Vitality where you should have won and then you lose, you think it's going to get any better when they play Rogue in G2 this next week? I feel like they're just going to get stomped twice again. And then people will somehow forgive it because Zanzara is like kind of funny. Like, okay, it's cool to have players that are likable. I think Zanzara is really good on camera, but at the end of the day, like, they got to perform better than this. Like, it can't just be him running it down for like 9 games straight and just getting a pass because he's funny.
Also, this is a team org, I'll say as well, where if you're going to have this team, if let's say you, for real, let's say they're honest and they go, look, we don't have the budget and we're not going to spend anywhere. It's not the org approach. Then at least put some of the money into like a coach that his specialty is scouting people, and he can go like 10 names deep on a position, and when everyone else picks the people they want from the RLs, he can still get the guy where it's like I say, maybe in a year that guy shows the promise of being like a top 4 player at his position. By the way, then you can even just sell him. You can even make that part of your fucked up cynical org approach, but like give us something. Because this is one of those teams where for real, I do start to feel like that clause, which I suspect will never be invoked, but should be, of like, if you have splits like this, a couple of them in a row, you already should sort of be under review. Like, it's one thing if you just put a foot wrong. This looks like they didn't even really try, mate. Listen, this is like the most phoned in split I've seen in a while. Because even the ones last year, like some of those players, like I said, some of them did deserve a shot in LEC. It's just not together in that particular bunch, you know. Like, I don't know. I feel like I've written them off mentally completely, mate. There's no point in this team. It's just boring.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's so fucked up is I wonder how much their last split actually helped them, right? Because I think the clause is that you have to be bottom 2 for 4 splits in a row.
Yes,
and they actually got 7th last split. So does that
they
mean
won an inordinate amount? I mean, logically, I think what you're saying is correct. You're right. That's the reason why, basically, that clause is so unfair. Even the way it's phrased doesn't seem like you charitably were trying to actually ever invoke it, you know? Because what the like in a best of one format as well, like that split, the last split's probably the best example, dude. They probably were one of the worst teams. I just remember they won a bunch of like inexplicable games at the end of the split and they even had one, I think, where someone just like threw it and didn't give a fuck, like at the end of spring or something. Like, mate, they had somewhere. So like, is anyone ever really going to do like that? It wasn't like 3 splits he said you had to do. Come on, man. Can anyone really be like that bad 3 in a row?
4 splits in a row. 4 you have to be bottom 2, right? So it's not only 4 that you have to be bottom 2.
It's almost impossible.
So that's just for the league to have the opportunity to invoke it. If they
right.
So then it's like, even if that happens, they could just be like, no, we don't want to invoke it.
Like, you're still here. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like this organization is really kind of like making a mockery out of what being an LEC is. They're actually just holding on to sell, and as a result, you have like 1 game a week that you're just not going to care about at all. I don't know. It's pretty fucked up in my opinion.
Yes, and then I'll just say as a final detail, if people wonder why I would even speculate this angle, in CSGO, they were the whole time the last few years trying to sell their really good CSGO team. In any respect, they would have sold them for parts. If you overpaid, they would sell the whole team. So I get the vibe personally. I believe behind the scenes when someone did a financial report about them, because in Denmark, all this stuff's public information, you just have to track it down. Basically, I believe the top guy who's like the main figure behind their team, sort of their version of Carlos, he, at the end of last year, was at the point where he could now sell his shares. And supposedly in most of his companies, he's at 5 years in Astralis, and in every other company, he's only ever lasted 4 years. So, you know, you can sort of see you can see how it's starting to come together on this. Like, I imagine he probably just wants to cash out this year. By the way, make a fuck ton of money. You bought the team fairly cheaply. You haven't spent much money. That's why I brought up that whole thing at the beginning, even though people will be like, how's that relevant? Because even though on paper you saw names like Alfari, Mithy, Nuke, they weren't getting the value those guys were. Think of that more like when people in the NBA at the end of their career and they just try to ring chase and they take the veterans minimum just to go on a good team. It's like a whole team did that. So sadly, as far as I can know, this org in league has never spent the money, even though they had a couple of teams that, if anything, were punching way above their weight. Right, so if we swap over now, we touched on a whole bunch already, but Vitality is obviously the team where I don't even really know if I can hate on this team in any way, Dom, because the problem is even when they lose, it's like they had such a strong period after the first week. And so many games that looked so good. I almost feel like they were due a shit game coming up at this point in time. I agree that one they should actually have lost. Like, here's the thing about Astralis you can also say. You know that whole terminology people use now where it's one thing to say a team throws, but the other one has to be able to catch it. Astralis can't catch shit, mate. Like, they're really fucking bad. Like, so the premise there is like, realistically, if that was another team, almost certainly Vitality loses that game. So, like, if we imagine that scenario, if that had been a competent squad, Vitality, what are the flaws? What are the big holes that you're seeing at the moment?
Well, I think it's tough. I mean, I'm still not convinced about Lebrov. Still watching him, I just feel like he's just not that level of player that you'd expect. I mean, everyone always just says he's super good, right? Like, he's one of the most well-liked players or by other players in the entire league.
No, they seem to just hype him off mechanics, though. I notice it always seems to be that exact way, like so clean. Oh, look at that! Like, it doesn't seem like for you, it's some sort of like lack of initiative or something at the highest level. Like, he's not doing the Kaiser Hillesang type plays, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's that, but then even like mechanics wise, I don't think that he's anything special. Like in this Thresh game, for example, that he played versus Astralis, like promisQ just bodied him the whole game. Like, not only did promisQ do better than he should have in lane, he roamed top. Like, Lebrov was nowhere to be found in this entire situation. So for me, the issue is like at some point this will lose you games. Like, if you play like this, and let's say that's Mad Lions and Kaiser is roaming all over the map, and Kaiser and Elioya are super ahead, they're not throwing at your tier 3. Like, you are 100% losing this game. So for me, my biggest issue is that I feel like there's not really like any jungle and support like connection, and then they're going to do things together. It's kind of like all the players are good in their own lanes, and then they just try to show up at like really obvious objectives together and figure things out. Like if I were to look at this team and I were to say what is like the team's playstyle going to be, I'm saying that you just pretty much like you weak side Carzzy every game. It actually seems like Carzzy has a pretty good handle of how to play weak side. Like if his team isn't there, he's not suiciding at every single turret, like dying for waves. Like he knows which waves he can catch, which waves he has to back off of, and all that stuff. I'm saying like this team should be like weak side bot every single game. Just try to have self-made and self-made just connect with both solo lanes. Self-made and Alfari, self-made and Perks. They need to just be able to do things together. Maybe throw Lebrov in there to like have like a 3-man like roaming unit, something like that. But like Perks is a hard carry of this team. Alfari is a hard carry of this team, and Carzzy will always be relevant in these games. I feel like that's the thing that you have to use. So, I mean, I think their first game versus Misfits was actually pretty good. The Yasuo Diana is something that I really like them bringing out. Obviously, Perks is one of the most famous Yasuo players in all of Europe. Like, especially as a bot laner, but as a mid laner, he can definitely play the champion. So I think that's something that they need to keep going for them. And then connecting Lebrov and Selfmade is something that I think this team needs to actually get down to get to the next level where they're actually winning LEC. I don't think that until they're able to actually play solid mid jungle, they'll be able to beat teams like Fnatic in form later on in the season, or even Rogue right now. It seems like Trimmy and Malrong have a much better idea of like playing together than Vitality. Mad Lions, obviously, they're not having the best go of it right now, but they're another team that I feel like has that potential. Kaiser and Elyoya could definitely like match up and do things around the map. I'm just not seeing any like support and jungle proactivity. And what I'm starting to feel like is neither the support nor the jungler actually knows when those timings are. Like, I don't know if Selfmade's the type of guy to be telling his support like, yo, like we need to go in and get vision right now. Like, okay, you're basing on this wave. Don't come bot. Like, don't go back bot. Come with me. We're going into their jungle. Those are things that are like hard to learn. And the more that I see Selfmade play, I feel like he's essentially just playing solo queue out there. Like he's just trying to get really strong and carry the game, as opposed to actually finding ways to coordinate with his team to be better as a team than other ones.
Yeah, I have a couple of points on that. One is, I would say, like, well, the best thing going for Vitality, especially in the context, if you've heard some of the discussions we've had about Fnatic on past episodes, is I think if you look at it, they've just got the best solo laners in the league. If you look at the solo lane duel they have, it's just the best game to game. So there's a massive edge. So as a result, I'm with you. I put a lot of this on Selfmade, mate, because the flaw I always saw in his game in past teams, look, when he was in like SK Gaming, who gave a fuck? Most of those players weren't good anyway, so you don't really give a fuck whether you can connect with them. Like some of them just didn't know what they were doing. I got the vibe personally in his teams. It's kind of like what you're saying there. I would characterize it as, I get the vibe he just plays for himself. But if this is why he also reminds me of Forgiven. It's like if you let him do his style, he knows how to win his style. The problem is this is another thing that reminds me of Forgiven, mate, is he doesn't seem to actually, this is one thing I think is a problem if you want to be a carry jungler. You have to be able to direct what you need of other people. I hate it when players do that thing where it's like, look, you should just know how to play around me. It's like, look, what is this, mate? Like, we're not in some sort of fucked up relationship, you know, where you have to like know that you wanted me to ask you to go to the restaurant that night, but not you tell me that. You're like, we're not doing that, mate. Like, at the end of the day, at some point in these review sessions, you have to be able to like communicate to me how your decision processes work so that I can join in this scenario. Because that is one of the concerns I have, is like, he's never been a part, like, he had Hillisang, and he didn't look like they had a great jungle mid fucking support synergy. They weren't like the best in the fucking world or anything. None of that. So I do have my concerns in that sense. Like, Labrov himself obviously isn't like super experienced player with great junglers either. So like that connection, I don't think that's an easy one to fix, mate. If someone just expects you to know what to do, that's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, and then the other thing you have to consider is these are the two guys that are remaining. These are the two guys that have had an entire split to play together, and it still looks like they don't have this idea. Like, they're not looking at each other like because there's times, right, on bot lane where bot lane will get a reset and the wave will be fine, and you don't need to go bot lane anymore to help your AD carry. Something needs to get done, but it doesn't feel like either of them know like what needs to be done in all the different situations. Like, maybe they'll look for things, but it never ends up being like the right decision, where it feels like when you watch really great like jungle support pairings, they know instantly what the meaning of like this reset timer is. Is it we're going in to get deep wards? Is it we're taking dragon? Are we like gonna gank top right now, like as a duo where they don't expect it? Do we just get vision like in river and then go back bot? Can we do nothing? Do you actually just go back bot here because there's nothing else that's possible to be done on the map based on when our laners actually need to reset and how many people, and like the jungler's timing as well. A lot of this stuff requires prep, and it's actually really hard to do. It's not something that's super easy. Like, you think that it's easy, oh, just base at the same time and then go do something together. Picking out what to do is the whole problem. This is why like most teams are never able to get this done. This is why in NA, almost no teams end up having this strong jungle support synergy, and then you just get bodied internationally. I feel like this is something that I'm going to be looking at really hard from week to week to see if there's any of these timers that are being abused. Like, are they communicating their resets together? And are they abusing the fact that like their lanes a lot of the times are just winning? Like, that should be the fundamental thing that should be the catalyst for this whole situation. Is our top winning? Is our mid winning? Bro, people will flame Perkz for his laning like in LCS, right? This split in LEC, Perkz has been one of the best laners.
Really good, yeah.
He's been really good this split. So you can't even say that like, oh, well, your laners are doing so poorly that you can't even help them out. Like they just need to be bailed out of their lanes. Like, no, there are options. You have timings. Let's see you do something with this timing. So I just feel like right now that's like kind of the issue that I see is neither of them are like that type of leader. They're not that guy that's going to demand the other person to go do something or be confident enough in telling the other person to do something. It seems like Selfmade just kind of wants to play his game, and then if like somebody tells him something that needs to be done, he'll do it. But outside of that, he's not going to be coordinating with his team to do something unless it's like really beneficial to him. He's like, we can kill the other fucking jungler here. That's like his type of shit. So I just want to see more progression in that facet, because outside of it, it just looks like you have 3 really good laners, but you don't have anything in between.
Yeah, you don't have the connective tissue. That's one thing I want to ask you. Like, look, bearing in mind this lineup, apparently it sounds like one of those ones where it's like everyone wanted to play with everyone. And like, I get the vibe they wouldn't possibly even consider switching anyone out. I think if I had all these sorts of players, they would just play out the split and you just see how it goes in the playoffs. But if we're doing like the football manager, the GM version where we can look at, would you consider like trying to put a different support in then? Would that be the move? Like taking someone from the ERLs or someone? Is there some type of play you'd want to add?
I think it's really hard because I'm not sure, right? Because there are players that have that like quality that you'd really want in ERLs, but I just don't watch enough to actually be able to determine who those players are. Like, for example, if there is like a Targamas that's just sitting in ERLs that's actually really fucking good and knows what to do in these situations, I think that could be really good. But like if there was a player like Kaiser, for example, when he came into the league, somebody who is showing these qualities, maybe, but I feel like it's one of the most rare things that you'll see out of a player that's not playing at the top level, because a lot of the times the way that you win at a tier 2 level is going to be by, I mean, number one, you want to look good individually because you want to be able to get into the next league. But it's also just like normally going to be through laning. Like, you're going to be more focused on how do I actually play better than these other guys in lane than trying to get the whole team working together, especially when like you're having players of much different experience levels all in the same team at the same time. Because when you look at ERL teams now, man, like they're crazy. It's like you have players like Jack Troll, Crown Shot that have been like, they've been playing in competitive for years and years and years. I mean, you have Reckless in fucking ERLs, bro. You have Cabochard in ERLs. You have a ton of players that are so experienced that like you're just dealing with different types of situations. Some teams are, you know, a bunch of young players that are all trying to get used to competitive play that were all really good in solo queue. Some teams are teams that look like they should be literally in LEC tomorrow. It's really hard to know, but I mean, I think that just in general, you wouldn't want to look for a swap, especially when the team is like 5-4. Like, even with the terrible week 1, you're not seeing bad results. So you want to let your team get a chance to get it together. I mean, I would be very surprised if we saw any change of this lineup the whole year round. Like, I don't think that we're going to even see anything until potentially after the year, if there's a failure. So for now, I think it's a lot on coaching staff. Like, coaching staff has to be able to pinpoint this issue that they have and find a way to correct it. And it's hard. I mean, that's the hardest part about coaching is the solution to the problem is different every single time, even if it's the same problem. Like, it's so based on the players and the people that you're working with, how that solution is actually going to apply to them. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is a job for Mephisto. He's got to figure out what actually needs to be done so that you start seeing this. And I think that this was blatantly obvious in the Astralis game. You almost lost a game off this, right? Not being able to track enemy support and just getting like out-roamed as a duo. I feel like this is a perfect example where you can use this game, and if you don't have like insane ego and you're not like, oh, it's just Astralis, we weren't focusing, and you actually pinpoint the problem, you could learn so much from that game.
Being as I alluded to before, if we use that premise that people are trying to figure out halfway through the split who have the best performance be, I thought this would be an interesting way to ask you about G2 because, like I said, in the off season when I was being told, like, look, we could have for real signed like the best Korean support or whatever, and we could have like bid for them, all this jazz, right? They told me the reason why, and they did make it largely about Targamas. They were just like, essentially the premise is this guy could like just be the best like immediately. Like it's not even like he's a prospect. Like he for real, we're willing to gamble, and like he might be the best support player in the league. How would you say he has lived up to that sort of expectation thus far?
I think he's the real deal. I think he's super legit. Like he seems really really smart about the game. I think I did a tier list. I think after week 2, I believe I put him 4th. I think now I'd probably put him top 3. I would probably drop Kaiser down as much as it sucks to do. I'd probably drop Kaiser down based on how he's been playing the split because you've seen a lot of the things that Kaiser was really good at. What we were just talking about with Vitality, the support jungle connection. We've seen that go really weird for them. I mean, they should have lost the game to BDS based off that. Like they were just doing some weird things together and just dying with Elyoya and Kaiser. And that's one of the parts of Mad Lions that you'd expect to be really, really consistent. So if Mad is not winning bot lanes by an absurd margin, and then they don't have like the jungle roaming really going, the jungle support roaming really going for them anymore, I think you have to say that Targamas has played better after the first 9 games than Kaiser. So I would say he's top 3, which is insane if you think about a player that that came out. The one thing I will say though is like it's really hard to do these types of mid-split awards because how would you rate somebody like Synchro? Because I think Synchro could be the real deal too. He might be somebody that you'd consider for top 3, but his team is so fucking bad compared to Targamas on G2 that he just might not be able to show how good he really is. Like, I think that's like the part that you start running into when you're dealing with rating supports and junglers and doing like mid-split awards. It's so team dependent.
I thought the eye test has looked great on him so far. I think in general, like I can sort of see what G2 was going for with the lineup they have. The problem I have is I do really just think like I feel like this is a team that the bad meta could just kill completely, mate. This is a team that I'm really skeptical on for the playoffs at the moment. Like they're still good players, but it's it's not the same as the last ones where it's like I don't see the identity. I just don't know if the team's good enough. That's the problem.
I feel like the team has some like weird decisions that they make that I mean, it feels like as a team, they don't play super well in the mid to late game, which is normally really important when you get into playoffs. Yeah, I mean, that Misfits game obviously always haunts you. I mean, they always have these like really, really bad games. Like, for example, versus Rogue, I mean, they just got completely shit on, right? They got completely shit on by Rogue. There was another game that they played either last week or the week before. Maybe it was the one against Vitality. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but they had another game like that where they completely collapsed. It was versus Vitality. It was the one where they had the Gragas top and like everything just kind of went to shit. That was the one where Perks was playing Oriana. Like that game looked really bad. So I feel like this team really crutches hard on being able to get early leads, and obviously they have the laners to do it mid and top. I just don't know if they're good enough in the mid game to actually beat some of the top tier teams. Especially like when you consider like, okay, so Fnatic isn't playing well right now. How would Fnatic actually be worse than G2 in playoffs based off like the quality of players they have?
A way to even put that together, right? It doesn't seem possible.
Yeah. It's very hard to think about. So yeah, I'm kind of on the side where I feel like G2, I mean, I kind of feel the same way as I felt before. They're going to end up being like a 4th place team, a 5th place team, somewhere around there.
Right. One of the other teams I want to touch on is obviously Misfits because they're a team that like has an interesting storyline. I think the problem I have with Misfits goes like this, Tom. I can summarize it in one sentence. They do look like so many games like, oh, this team could do something like they could actually be even better, I think, but they just don't win the big games. They just lose all the big games that pretty much all of them that they play. So like I've always said, like it's a bit like that fucking line from that Kanye Jay-Z song where it says like moral victories are for minor league coaches. Like a moral victory only works in the premise because obviously XL last split was the ultimate example of this. Like it's all well and good having a bunch of games like, oh, I was this close to winning, but like eventually when that becomes the pattern, it's like, yeah, but that actually shows you, listen, you are good, but you're not as good as those teams. Like there's a reason you're losing 5 out of 6 of those games or whatever. That feels like where this team settled into. So look, I'm on the Vethio train. He is the truth. He does look fucking mega, but so many other parts of that team are just like, yeah, it's good, but they're not going to be doing much, unfortunately. I don't feel like.
Yeah,
I want to believe. I want them to be the dark horse team I can believe in, but I don't think I can do them.
Yeah, I think it's really hard unless you see some like drastic improvement from Mersa. I don't really see how this team starts beating top teams. The other player I would look at is Hirit, because I feel like Hirit last split was, if not the best top laner in the league, one of the best top laners in the league. I like how magically, like as soon as Adam played in playoffs, like we just forgot that like Hirit existed and like
Yes,
BB
true.
existed and all those fucking people. It's like Adam beat Wonder, and then suddenly, here it was just a completely irrelevant. But here it was somebody who, like, on carry top leaders, was one of the absolute
Sure.
best players in this league. And I want to see him go back to that. Like, I want to see him be playing the Jace, just completely shitting on people. I mean, he's been having like games here and there. There was the game against Mad Lions where he just dumpstered Armut, but that looked more like Armut just kind of running it down than here it really doing anything spectacular. So for me, I'm looking to see here it return to form. I think that's like really the answer, because it does look like Vetio has evolved. He's become a top player in his role. Now we just need to see here it become a top player again. And then I feel like maybe you have the pieces to do something. But unfortunately for them, doing something is still not winning LEC. Doing something for them, for me, is like, oh, you beat out Mad Lions or you beat out G2 and you advance like one round into the playoffs. If they win one round of the playoffs, I think that's a success for this team.
Yeah, if you have a look, it basically looks like every single time Hirit has a bad game, they lose every single game. Like the correlation's like 100% at this point in time.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there any other team we should talk about? Is there like one last topic you want to do here? I'm trying to think of who haven't we talked about.
I mean, I think we could do Mad Lions. I feel like Mad Lions is
I've got an angle on this I want to pick your brain on, which goes like this. People have to pick. Are you ready? You can pick. You can either really believe in Rika, like the Mad Lions coaching staff do, or you can be the people who think Unforgiven was like some like sleeper gem in the RLs and he's been pretty good in some games. So there's the problem though. You can't have both. Like I've seen enough games now, Dom. It can't be both. They can't both be the truth. This is not going to be a team that wins LEC. I'm sorry. Like I've seen enough games now. There are some nice pieces there, like as we were talking about earlier. If Elyoya and fucking Kaiser ever get on the same page again, they potentially have the best fucking jungle support duo. Like I think one of the two could be legit. So far, I have to say, if I have to pick of the two, I'm going with Unforgiven of the two. Like, but I'm not buying the idea both these players can come in, play two of. And I know ADC is not the biggest role in the world right now, but mid lane is always going to be in LEC. Like, I think this roster just isn't quite up to snuff, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I will say
definitely just phones it in during the regular split, so I can't even know if I can blame him for that one. I'm waiting for playoffs to see how up.
Yeah. I mean, Armut is just one of those players that like he's in that tier for me where like until he proves us wrong and like instant playoffs,
yes,
you're gonna give him credit. It's like he'll probably be
a free card for now. I'll give him that. He's proven it enough times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's just, man, it's so crazy how like Armut gets the pass and then Rogue is like winning every single fucking game, and then we're still like, yeah, they're gonna fucking choke. Like, maybe we really are just like some old delusional men at this point. But like, when I look at Mad Lions, I think that Rika and Unforgiven are playing fine based on like what you'd expect from new players. Yeah. I do think Elyoya and Kaiser are the ones that I would like put most of the blame of things not going so well onto, because they should be the best. Like that's their standard. They were the best jungler and the best support all of last year. Where is it now? Like now they're getting what? They're losing support in jungle to limit and sync. They're just doing weird things and throwing games. That's what needs to change. I feel like Rika and Unforgiven are progressing. I actually thought this last game that Rika played versus BDS on Victor, he had some really nice movement in fights. Like there was a couple fights that I rewatched where I was like, holy shit, like this guy
pop up for sure. Yeah,
this guy is dodging everything and hitting like he just has this presence in team fights that a lot of players don't have. Like you'll look at players, man, I hate to flame Tommy randomly, but you look at players like Ryoma coming into LCS. After years, I've still never seen that in a team fight from him. Just like that ability to just know what spells he needs to dodge, where he needs to stand. Okay, like I got Camille ulted, I'm actually going to walk forward here, then take the lantern to reposition. I've never seen that out of him in his entire like career. So that's the type of shit that gives me hope. Coincidentally, the player that had been playing the best on Mad Lions, I guess I've said the best, but like out of these two players, the player that had been playing better out of their two new recruits was Unforgiven up until this game. But Unforgiven actually had a pretty bad game, I would say. Like he just ran it down a couple times where there was just no real excuse for it. I feel like this team does have, like, I don't think that Rika or Unforgiven is going to be so bad you can't win a championship. It's just that Elyoya and Kaiser actually just need to be that good. They have to just be the best by far again. I don't know what's happened, but I think if I had to guess what's happening, I'd say that they're playing way too many different champions. When I thought about Mad Lions before, when I would think about Elyoya, he would just pick the same champion. Like he was just like, oh, I'm picking like Udyr. Okay, Udyr's gone. I'm playing Hecarim. Okay, Volibear's in the meta. I'm playing Volibear. Like he would just go down the list of like champion, like of all the strong picks. And now I feel like he's being like a little bit too experimental with some of the things, like the fleet footwork Nidalee. I really didn't like that game. He's playing like he has weird prio on his picks compared to other things. So I just kind of want to see more stability. I want to see Kaiser playing the champions that he plays. I want to see him not on Thresh and Yuumi anymore. I want to see him on Nautilus, Leona, Rakan, like the champions that he's really good on. And I want to see Elyoya like shrink the champion pool up, not a lot, but just maybe by like 1 or 2 champions. Just keep it into like that 3-4 that he plays super fucking well. And I want to see Mad Lions really like use that as the building block for the other pieces, because it feels like in a way, if Kaiser and Elyoya are playing worse, it makes it harder for Reeker and Unforgiven to improve to the level that you're going to need them to be at to win a championship.
That makes me wonder as well, because one thing I've always thought can be a flaw in coaching is if you're trying the long-term approach of like you want to experiment with things, you want to try different people out on different types of champions and composition. That's all well and good if you really are building towards a long-term. You're going to learn things from these losses or the difficulty of executing something. But if you want to just win games, like if you have a team like Mad Lions, like you're saying about Kaiser, you just identify where this guy is like arguably the best in Europe, and you give him the champions that let him do those things. Like one thing I don't like to do in general, except if it's like I say, some specific like experiment we're trying, is you don't use good players to band-aid other problems in the team. Like at the end of the day, like in theory, that's usually what the bad players are supposed to be for. They're supposed to be the ones that just find some way to fit like I can do this one thing for you. You don't use a good player for that, because if you do so, like you're going to fuck up your own, like you say, the priority of what picks you're going to take, your comp's just going to be off. Like at the end of the day, what I always think of is this, right? I want the other team, when they're doing the scouting report on us, to be like, we've got to take this away from him and this, and if that is ever where it's like, well shit, actually my draft's going to take that away from him, then I've got a really serious question I ask myself about this specific game, if I'm essentially giving them a favor in the draft, etc. So I'm a little bit off in that sense, because Mad Lions, with the sheer like volume of players and turnover they've had, they must have good coaching stuff. Like the scouting's clearly on point. They integrate these players again and again. Every split so far with a new lineup, they've made it look good. They've managed to get it working at least by the middle point. But the question, this one I have is like, some of these players, they are rookies, remember? Like, you have to make it pretty streamlined. You can't expect them to be these like complete all-around players, even if you want them to be.
Yeah, definitely. All I'm saying is like, look, if Elyoya just starts like playing, Poppy when it's good, Jarvan, he throws in a little, like, so he has Poppy, Jarvan, Xin, and like maybe a little bit of Lee Sin when it's good. If he just sticks to like those 4 champs, I'm pretty sure he'll just be the best jungler of the league again. And if we just see Kaiser on the stuff that he's proven on, because like he played a zillion game too, didn't he? Like he's played zillion Yuumi, Thresh. It's like he's almost never playing the engaged support. It's not like he's playing like 3 games of engaged supports and then every like 4th game he just tries something weird and it doesn't work out. It's like he's playing so much of other shit that it makes me almost nervous. Like, is he going to go back to engaged supports and not be as good at it anymore? Like, does he lose that baseline that he has? Probably not. But just for me, I just want to see them like just play like the Mad Lions that we know you can be, and just get some more wins on the board. Because right now, like 5-4, you're in a kind of sketchy spot. Like you got to remember, like what XL is 4-5 or something. Like you could end up losing a playoff spot if you have a couple bad weeks at the wrong time, if you put yourself in this position. So I'm really hoping that these next couple weeks they actually get wins. I mean, they have a pretty big match. Like they have SK, which is obviously should be free, but they have a pretty big match. I mean, I guess they lost SK last time, so maybe it's not as free as I think. But anyways, they have a pretty big match against G2. If they come out and like really stop this match and look like old Mad Lions, I'm willing to get back on the train again. I'm willing to just be like, yeah, this team should be top 3 in Europe. I just want to see that out of them.
Sure. Right. Obviously, that's the end of the show. Blah, blah, blah. See you next week. Thanks to all the fans and my parents for giving birth to me or whatever. One day we will all be dead, but for now, let's enjoy talking about League of Legends. See you next week.